So Hinduism 101. We're going to take a few slides here to really delve into Vedic Hinduism and the origins within that. But in order to really go into the creation stories and speak about that, I want to do like a Hinduism 101 class. There's a lot of misconceptions with Hinduism and a lot of things that have been jumbled together that maybe didn't come directly from Vedic awareness or Hinduism. And raised a Hindu myself, right? I didn't even know some of these things up until like 5-6 years ago. Like last 10-15 years, yeah, a lot of concepts that many people that are devout Hindus in India and outside of India, I definitely knew them because I wasn't following Hinduism with blind faith at any point in my life. I wasn't just accepting it. I was researching it. So I knew these concepts, but there were many other things that I didn't even realize until last year when my wife Sol and I took a yoga instructor course, and our friend Jay, who's our instructor, literally broke down some truths about the evolution of Vedic history, and it shed a lot of light on, where we got a lot of concepts within the spiritual community now, and how we use it now, and how it wasn't designed for that originally. The evolution of spirituality, basically. So Hinduism 101 incorporates many religious ideas and philosophies. It's not just one thing. For this reason, it is sometimes referred to as a way of life or family of religions. Actually, Hinduism before the Persians and the Khans actually came to India to invade and take over certain areas, before that, Hinduism was actually called Sindhu. Sindhu. It was not Hindu, it was Sindhu. But when the foreigners had arrived, they could not pronounce Hindu in their dialect. They could not pronounce Sindhu in their dialect, so they changed it to Hindu. So Hindu was actually the word that was created from the conquering of India. Also, it was called Sindhu Dharma. Dharma means laws of the universe. So Hinduism was never considered a religion until the British invaded, and they kind of, their influence really made Hinduism more of an external religion rather than what it was originally was, which was a spiritual tradition about the internal world and how to achieve certain states of consciousness. So Sindhu Dharma literally means, let's just say Hindu laws of the universe. That's what it was. Most forms of Hinduism, which is also why if you read the text, there is no you can't do this. These are no commandments of how to do this. It's just how to live your life abundantly, fruitfully, with others, in peace and empowered. That's what the original text, the Vedic texts, really were about. Most forms of Hinduism worship a single deity, which many people wouldn't know, because a lot of people think that Hinduism is a paganistic religion. So the single deity is known as Brahman, but they still recognize the other gods and goddesses, which are personalities and reflections of that original source. Brahman is God with an uppercase G. The other gods are gods with a lowercase g, which are demigods, like in the Greek mythology, which are crossbreed hybrids on Earth with humans, which some, can be argued that these beings actually existed and maybe there were some sort of extraterrestrials. And then some people may believe that they're just, they never really existed at all, but each of these gods represent a different personality trait, and their story and their look is completely manifested and created to represent that personality trait. So they didn't exist, but in order to represent this part of reality in this world of forgiveness, whatever, this being was created. So there's arguments for that. And then there's also the arguments for the fact that these beings actually did exist. And there's evidence to suggest they existed, like archaeological evidence as well in the Himalayas that they found, which happened to be the home of these gods, just like Mount Olympus. It's the same story, actually. Okay, so followers believe there are multiple paths to reaching God consciousness. So in Hinduism, you cannot actually convert. So one thing that the reason why I really never didn't, when I became awoke to a lot of spiritual and consciousness stuff, I did not push Hinduism away, even though I realized organized religion was kind of responsible for a lot of hardships in the world. I didn't push Hinduism away because in Hinduism, there is no way to convert to it. There is no organization to convert to it. They're not sending people worldwide trying to convert you. There's no, what's it called, missions where they go around the world trying to make people go into it. Yet they're one of the largest religions in the world. Yet they don't even convert people. And other religions actively go out and have spent their whole history trying to convert people either peacefully or by the sword, right? So I was really interested in the fact, why do they do that? Well, in the Rig Veda, one of the first lines in the Rig Veda, which is one of the 4 Vedic scriptures that Hinduism came from, says that there are many pathways to the same destination. So the reason why you don't have to convert to Hinduism, but you can convert out of it anytime you want, because they're not going to hold you back. If you want to be something else, do whatever you want. The reason is because there are many pathways to the same destination. What religion you are, whoever you are as a person, what religion you are doesn't signify where you're going to end up. Who you are as a person, the love, compassion you have for yourself and for others, your actions on the planet, your state of mind, the moment you die. Do you forgive yourself? Are you at peace with yourself? Do you have any regrets? Literally is the imprint of how your next reality will manifest. So as long as you work on that, then you can live a beautiful life. Why convert to any religion? So Hinduism is closely related to other Indian religions because they came from them, such as Buddhism, Sikhism, but then also it's closely related to Christianity, Zoroastrianism, and Greek mythology. And for example, in Hindu text actually talks about the arrival of Jesus and how he was going to come to another part of the world. Most Hindus that know anything about Hinduism, a lot of Hindus don't really know a lot about Hinduism, but most of them that do knows that Jesus is accepted as one of the world prophets. So it's a really open tradition. So in Hinduism these days, we have a lot of blind faith going on, like we do for many religions, and which is what really moved me away from it in the first place. And it's just a disconnection from ancient principles. Right now, it's kind of more ritualistic. And even though when Hinduism first began, in the Vedic age, 1500 BC, it was a hugely ritualistic society. There was a ritual for everything. And so a lot of them are doing rituals now and just doing what they are basically think they need to do in order to create contracts and agreements with the gods. So originally, Hinduism was all contractual, right? Which is kind of goes against, or is the opposite of what we feel maybe the spiritual community is trying to push now. It was all contractual. The beginning ages is shifted later, but it was like, if I do this ritual, this ritual, this ritual, this God will give me this. So now most Indians that are Hindu or people in the world have forgot the ancient principles and are focusing exclusively on the rituals, and also have a lack mentality of not having enough when they do the prayers to God. So that blind faith has moved a lot of people away. It's really interesting because Hinduism is one of the isn't all religions, all cultures have a lot of beautiful history to it, but it's definitely got some of the most truths hidden in plain sight within the text compared to other texts that have literally written them out. But because of the blind faith nature, people don't dissect and delve into them to figure out what it's really talking about. And I'll give you an example here. So many opposing and conflicting philosophies emerge over time. A lot of you on here probably know what Tantra is. Some of you might not know what moksha is. Moksha is the state of the Atman, which is the soul that you want to achieve. Moksha is liberation. Liberation from suffering, liberation from the hardships of the world, but not having to leave the world. Making your consciousness vibrate to another level of awareness that you achieve moksha. For many sages and yogis in the ancient past, their whole life was dedicated to moksha. So the only way to achieve supreme moksha, and even the Buddha said this, but the Buddha never said you just have to achieve moksha. He said you can still have a worker's life and do certain things. But in order to achieve full moksha, you need to cut out a lot of things from your life and create simplicity and rely on the hospitality of others in order to eat and things like that. So Tantra, believe it or not, is actually the opposite of moksha, of liberation. They came from the same Vedic traditions, but check this out. Moksha was for the sages and the gurus that had all the time in the world in order to meditate and pray and to bring amazing, famous yogis into their communities in order to teach all their rich friends. That's literally how it began. The moksha wasn't. Do you think the householder and the farmer and the peasant back then had the ability to spend all this time achieving moksha? No. They wanted something themselves. What did they want? They wanted to see how they can be empowered and feel great, but live in the body. Tantra is a pleasure based philosophy of the moment, living in the now, enjoying your body's functions. Whereas moksha, you have to cut out a lot of those bodily sensations, including ultimately cutting out sex, not even being intimate with someone. So if you really want to achieve full moksha, whereas tantra is not that. So how interesting is it now? We exist in a future where spirituality has permeated all of the world, you know, and people on this platform are definitely into it. And we even incorporate tantra and moksha all within the same community and consciousness. So those are just two examples. Our yoga instructor course, we went down all the philosophies from the Upanishads all the way to modern time, and we're talking about where they all came from and the reasons why each of them came out. And if you see, a lot of these philosophies that now merge into one in the Western world literally came out opposing the other philosophy because they weren't into it or they were excluded in the beginning. So the primary sacred texts in Hinduism are known as the Vedas, and they were composed probably before 1500 BC, but around 1500 BC. And they are the Rig Veda, the Samaveda, the Yajur Veda, and the Atharva Veda. Now we're going to get into the migration into India. So I'm actually going to eventually do a presentation that's going to exclusively track the migration of different cultures from outside of India into Mohenjo-daro and the Indian Kush Valley that is in the Himalayas, North India and Pakistan, which is where the Indus civilization flourished before the Indian subcontinent was populated. So I want to do a whole presentation on that because there's been a lot of people that have said that Vedic history goes back tens of thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, right? So obviously, if it goes back that far, then that means they predate Egypt and a lot of other places. So for a while, I was wondering whether India predated Egypt, and I was going with the angle of thinking that was the case and how to prove that. That's where I went in with it, thinking. But then I found out that's not the case at all. But it seems there's probably tribes in India, but it seems like there was a migration out of Egypt into the Indian Kush Valley in North India, and many other cultures also migrated there. And the Indians that, you know, like me, literally I'm a descendant, and I am probably more of a direct descendant because I am 100% Indian. My parents were born in India. My dad was, my grandparents were born in North India. And for thousands of years, there is no, we had no interbreeding with anybody except for the people that founded our civilization, because my family was just in North Punjab, right there at the foot of the Himalayas, for thousands of years, being influenced from all these other cultures. So when I did a DNA test, right, I thought I was going to find all these things out. But what did I get? I got 99.9% pure Indian. And then I got 0.1% Polynesian, but 0.1% could be a fluke, is what they said in the small print. So, like, basically, I'm 100% Indian, and that's crazy because how many people can go get a DNA test and literally in the 2,000 years that we've been tracking it, show that they haven't diluted the bloodline at all? It's been like just pure one thing. So this is what really made me want to find out the migration into India. Who are the people that I came from? So modern day Indian is a combination of many ancient cultures. Egypt, which is known as the land of Kemet, and that's a good thing for all of you to know. Egypt was an Anglo-Greek name given to Egypt. The original name for Egypt was Kemet. And the land of Kush. Kush was a civilization not too far south of Egypt that was a breakaway civilization from Egypt that was at peace with Egypt at times and then also fought from them. But there were basically people that weren't happy with what was going on at that time, and they broke away and created their own civilization. Also, the Aryans from Persia and the Caucasus Mountains, and then Mongolians. And in this order, basically, the original civilization in Mohenjo-daro in the Indus Kush Valley was probably was definitely African descent, probably from Egypt and Kush. And then soon after that, the Aryans came down. And then soon after that, the Mongolians and the Khans came down. And now you got me. So migration to the Hindu Kush Valley created the Indus civilization around 2900 BCE. So the Indus civilization existed about 1400 years before the Vedic age. So their civilization was around for quite some time, that a lot of time to come up with many concepts. And eventually they began migrating south into India. The Vedas are thought to be written around 1,000 years after the civilization was created. So now here's some cool maps. So we're going to take a look here and look at the migration into India. If you look down, if you can, hopefully you can follow my cursor here. But so locate Egypt firstly, right? So right here, Egypt, and now go down right here. You see this at the bottom right here? This is actually where the land of Kush was. And that will show you in the next map. So the migration out of Africa was probably from Egypt to Kush. Some of them probably went directly from Egypt. But look, right across the Red Sea, all the way across, I think that's Saudi Arabia now, and then up into right here, where Kuwait is, all the way down into, boom, right here, the Indus civilization. So this was the migration, probably for the first settlers of Mohenjo-daro. And here is a map of Egypt and Kush. So we see Egypt is right there, Kush right below it, and then you can see this is exactly right there at the bottom is where the migration began. So as they moved over, they created this amazing place. And Mohenjo-daro was just the capital city of Harappa. Harappa was the name of the whole, Harappa was the capital city. Mohenjo-daro was even bigger. It was the industrial city of that Indus civilization. And this is pretty much where they were and where they looked. And this is current day Afghanistan, Pakistan, and parts of North India. And then what happened next was, all of a sudden, from the Caucasus Mountains, these Persians, not the same Persians as we know today, but they came from Persia, came down the Caspian Sea, plateau of Iran, and they arrived right here. What is this right here? Oh, the Hindu Kush Valley. Oh, the Indus civilization. What happened is that they forced the civilization that existed there to move south. Whether it was through war, whether it was that these people tried to come peacefully, but there was too many of them, whether they intermingled and the civilization became too big and they had to go down south, whether there was nuclear fallout and war, like evidence suggests it could have been, we don't know. It could be any of those. But we do know is that people from Egypt and Kush were migrating over here, came to this Hindu Kush Valley, made the Indus civilization, and over millennia later had to get pushed down because of the entrance of the Aryans from Persia. So there is no real origin story in the Hindu text. There are many stories that could be put together as origin, right? We have the one with the egg, for example. But the period when the Vedas were composed became known as the Vedic period. And this was from around 1500 BC to 500 BC. So the Vedas and the spiritual scriptures that was the foundation of Hinduism lasted for 1,000 years. And then rituals such as sacrifices and chanting were common. As I said before, a very ritualistic society. There are many similar stories throughout the Vedas. The Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita show up in many other scriptures. So a lot of these stories that we find throughout the Vedas, we can find similarities throughout other scriptures. And just a quick example would be Krishna having the exact same story as Jesus Christ. Krishna is born, his father was a carpenter. He's born to a virgin mother, known as the savior to his people. The list goes on. There's like 20 different similarities. They were the same person, different timeline. So whether one story took from the other story, or whether the exact same incarnational cycle occurred and with the same template, that is the question. In Hinduism, it is more common to find origin stories per deity than in many cases symbolizes the origin of what is being represented. So rather than finding one story about all of the beginning of creation, each deity or manifestation of the one, the Brahman, has their own origin story that also symbolizes scientifically and metaphorically what occurred in order for that element or reality to manifest on Earth. Example is fire or sentient awareness, just the fact that we're humans that are sentient and woke up. Similar to Greek mythology, extremely similar. In Hinduism, Brahma is an impersonal force. All of creation is within it. All deities are manifestations within it. So we also have in Hinduism, another connection to Christianity is the Trinity. We have Shiva, Brahman, Vishnu. In Christianity, we have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. So when I started doing research for this, one of the things that I was searching was, is there any connection to the Hindus and other religions in the world? Do any of the gods have the same stories? Firstly, I went into it thinking, okay, there's an Egyptian Indian connection, so therefore, are the Hindu gods the same as the Egyptian gods, right? But as I started researching this, I started finding out that, wait a second, it looks like Hinduism or Vedic information sprouted from the same source as the Greek traditions. Even the spiritual concepts came from there. And now it looks like for sure, like there are videos on the internet about Greek colonies in India, ancient Greek colonies in India. The Kalish people that exist in North Pakistan are literally the descendants of Alexander the Great, who were stranded there and left there. And they speak like a dialect of Sanskrit, right? And most Indian Hindus that speak Hindi can actually communicate with them, but they're Greek. They're like straight up Orthodox Greek, and so they so there was a lot of sharing of culture, and it seems that maybe the Mohenjo-daro civilization, right here, was actually right in between what Greece and modern day India. So whatever civilization was there could have actually spread out in all directions and taken that same information all over the place. So let's break down a few similarities within Greeks and the Hindus. So we have Zeus and Indra. Zeus are both kings of gods. They're both the king of the sky storms, thunder, lightning, and rain. So both of them are the king of thunder, lightning, and rain. Zeus uses a thunderbolt, and Indra uses a vajra. But a vajra is Sanskrit for thunderbolt. So they use the exact same thing. And they both live on mountains, and they are both extremely promiscuous. So you got to watch out with them. And then we have Hermes and Narada. They're both the messengers of the gods. They're both tricksters, and they both created music. And they are both known as creating the lyra. So the lyra was what? Pythagoras' favorite instrument, the thing in order for him to figure out how to create geometry and all material structures, including bridges, houses, buildings, masonry. All of that came from Pythagoras' research. And he used the lyra, and the lyra is directly connected to Hermes, but that's the same exact god as Narada. There can only be one. It's not a coincidence because there can only be one individual that created it, right? But they have the same story. We have Surya and Helios. They're both sun gods, and they both have chariots. Athena and Saraswati. Athena is the goddess of arts and industry, and Saraswati is wisdom, music, and art. Athena was actually born fully grown in an armor suit. She popped out in armor. And then Saraswati was born fully grown, and she came out of the mouth of her mother. So these are just four sets of gods. Every single Greek god has a corresponding Hindu god.